Okay, you guys had questions about kegging. Starts with a keg. I have my bleach water, my hose, the lid. Just dipped it in bleach, clean underneath all of your seals, and then let it dry. Bam. We'll talk about that hose later. So now I'm going to sanitize the crap out of this thing, and I'll show you a video of some of the parts. Something else you're going to need is some sort of a CO2. This is a really huge bottle. You don't have to have anything this big, but you have to have a regulator. I've charged this. It doesn't actually, it's off right now, but I've charged it. When I fill the kegs, I wanted about 20 psi in there. See, about 20 to charge it. I would get a regulator that's smaller than this though. Okay, something else you can do, because I have a really big thing of CO2, is I can charge this and help clean out all the tubes, which is what I'm going to do with just some water. So I've got my gas on now, regulator set to about 20 pounds, and I start filling. It's pretty much that simple. This thing will come back up just like any other gas valve. That thing will come up to 20 pounds when it actually gets to 20 pounds. This lets me check for leaks and everything before I shove a bunch of beer in it. And my son is here. Woohoo! Looks like I'm actually only set to maybe 15 pounds, so I'm going to crank it up because I want 20 when I go to charge the keg and put CO2 in the beer. So it'll balance out. It's going to balance out, and then I have an off valve here, so just kill it. This has a backflow valve in it so that it doesn't allow beer to come back up through the gas chamber. Anyway, now I disconnect, and I've got a leak. Okay, that was fun. So I took it apart. Everything looks clean in here, as far as I can tell. This is the valve. This washer may be starting to go out, and so this valve may actually be dead, but I'm going to try it again and see what happens. It just goes in there like that, and then it pushes through, and so when I took it apart, I may have screwed it up a little bit, and so I need to reflush it up and try again. Attempt number 2. It's filling. I'm not going to let it go all the way up this time, just to see. Looks like I fixed the problem. So now I'm ready to drain this and fill it with beer. EA for beer. Okay, nothing special here. I'm just siphoning beer from the fermenter into the keg. You'll see about how much room you want to have in here though when you're done. Now if you can get yourself a big hose to siphon with, definitely helps. This is going to be the most boring part of this video. I'll put some cool music on here. Another benefit to having a bunch of CO2 is right now I am pushing CO2 out of the keg. So even if they're splashing in the keg, it doesn't matter. I'm actually just getting CO2 in there. I'm still not mixing my beer with air at this point. So the displacement of CO2 is I don't know, advised. If you can fill the keg with CO2 prior to filling it with beer, it's definitely worth it. So I'm going to keep an eye on my gas tube. If the gas tube touches the beer, well, we have a problem. So we want to make sure the beer stays below the gas tube. Which in my case, the gas tube goes to about here. So about that far down is how far we can fill it with beer. So we wait. And I'm going to call it there. Just let my tube drain. Make sure. So I'm about an inch from my gas tube. That's a good distance. And I've still got some leftover beer I'll deal with once I'm done. But for now, I gotta charge this thing. washed my hands, and so I told you it was a lot easier than bottling, and like that, I'm now ready to charge this thing with CO2 and have a beer while I finish the rest of what I'm doing. So, let's go charge it. Now that there's beer, I do want to be extra careful that I don't get backflow. That means this top isn't sealing. Wiggle it into place here. Great. So, I need to look and see what's going on here, why we're not getting a good seal. Try it again. There we go. I don't think it was at the right angle. Now it's sealed up. And we're at 20 pounds. Remember, you only have 4 inches to the top of this container, so getting it to 20 pounds takes half a second. Now the fun part. Looks like my valve was fine still. Now I have to mix the CO2 in. Also a good way to make sure you're not leaking. And then you want to try and add some more CO2. So I'm still adding more and more CO2 with every shake. I'm going to let it sit this time for just a little bit, get some of that CO2 pushed into the beer, and get ready to have a sample. Okay, I'm about to take a sample. A couple things that are important. When you first attach this, you want to watch for any kinds of leaks. Again, that's where testing it prior to filling it with beer comes in really handy. I don't seem to have any leaks at this point. It is at 20 psi, which is way too hot for pouring beer. Beer is like, I think 8 pounds of pressure, something like that. Between 8 and 10 is what I run once the keg is down a ways. So about halfway through the keg, I'll actually turn on my CO2, set the regulator to about between 8 and 10 pounds, and then just leave it going, and that just gives it a nice head. This is going to be super foamy, but to avoid a little bit of that, I'm going to discharge some. And again, I can recharge it after I'm done. We just want to make sure that some of our CO2 is getting into the beer and make sure that it's going to taste good at this point. So I definitely discharged quite a bit, but it looks pretty good. Pretty good head. So yeah, all in just like 30 minutes or so, I've got it charged and ready to go. Cleanup is really important. This tube has to be cleaned all the way or it will mold. So either fill it with CO2 through an extra empty keg. Kind of when you get done, just recharge your keg, fill it with water, clear it out, and then the seals on both ends will make sure that it stays filled with CO2 and doesn't mold. Otherwise, just put it in some bleach water, open up the ends or pull them back out and make sure to drain it. That's pretty much it. That's kegging.